we are go for launch.
5.
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Anything can happen in the next half hour.
4.
My friend, we cannot keep this a secret any longer.
This whole thing is insane.
3.
Quiet, please. I am analyzing.
Where's the kaboom?
2.
There was supposed to be an earth-shattering kaboom.
1.
There is nothing wrong with your television set. Do not attempt to adjust the picture. We are controlling transmission. If we wish to make it louder, we will bring up the volume. If we wish to make it softer, we will tune it to a whisper. We will control the horizontal. We will control the vertical. We can roll the image, make it flutter. We can change the focus to a soft blur or sharpen it to crystal clarity. For the next hour, sit quietly and we will control all that you see and hear. We repeat, there is nothing wrong with your television set. You are about to participate in a great adventure. You are about to experience the awe and mystery which reaches from the inner mind to the outer limits.
Greetings, my fellow galactic travelers, and welcome back to Planet 8. This is your Mission Commander Larry speaking to you from our hidden base. Chief Engineer Bob is here by my side as always in the command center, and circling Planet 8 in our orbital spy satellite is Reconnaissance Officer Karen.
And on this episode of Planet 8, it's been the kind of year where you think to yourself, what the heck is going on? So what we've done is we've taken a look at an anthology series, a classic anthology series that deals with what could be called 2020, but we call it The Outer Limits. So straight away, we're going to kick it up to the satellite. And Karen, what do you know about The Outer Limits?
Well, Larry, I know a lot about The Outer Limits because I really love this show. I'm really pleased we're taking some time to talk about The Outer Limits. Like you said, an anthology series. You know, these were really popular on TV in the 50s and early 60s. They all sort of started to go the way of the dinosaur by the mid-60s. I was kind of looking back, and Outer Limits had a very short run, came on in September of 63 and was off by January of 65. So had about a season and a half. If you look back at some of its contemporaries or peers, however you want to look at it, you know, Twilight Zone had a nice run from 59 to 64. Alfred Hitchcock Presents was on from 55 to 65. So sort of similar shows in some ways, had longer runs. So Outer Limits really just had a brief moment in the sun, so to speak. There were 49 episodes, 32 in the first season, 17 in the abbreviated second season. The show was originally going to be called Please Stand By, but ABC, the network that ran it, kind of nixed that. So they went with Outer Limits, which I think was a snazzier title anyway. It was the creation of Leslie Stevens. So he was a kind of interesting guy. Reading about him reminded me a little bit of Gene Roddenberry, but not quite so much. Not as eccentric as Gene Roddenberry. But Stevens was born, I think, in the 20s, and when he was a young man of like 15, he traveled with Orson Welles' Mercury Players as sort of a gopher for a while. He actually kind of disappeared, and his parents were like, where the heck is he? And then they found out he was traveling with Orson Welles. So a little bit of a colorful character. In 43, he entered World War II as an intelligence officer, so got involved with that and was a pretty smart guy. And then started entering into, after the war, entering into show business. did some work writing songs and tunes for different things, and then got his big break in TV as a writer for Four Star Playhouse, and kind of moved around and started doing a variety of things and became sort of this triple threat as a producer, writer, director. He founded his own company, Daystar Productions, and that's what you see when you watch Outer Limits. It says it's produced by Daystar Productions. And so he came up with this concept for Outer Limits, and he wanted to do sort of a really literate kind of science fiction show on TV. He really wanted to kind of push the concepts. He wanted to make people really see themselves in these characters that he was putting out there. He wanted to stress concepts of humanity and have a strong theme. He was really interested in doing a show with impressive cinematography. So he was trying to put this all together, but the problem was when he took it to the network, they were a little leery of putting this show on because they felt like he was maybe going to be overworked, that he wouldn't be able to do it all. So he brought in an old friend of his, Joe Stefano, who also had been involved in songwriting and then got into TV and film. And he was at that time best known for being the screenwriter for Psycho.
Ah.
So they said, "Oh, okay, you're going to bring this guy in to be to be a producer, writer, director on the show as well." And so when Stefano was brought in, they gave the go-ahead for the show. And you can kind of see the two men had stylistic differences in that the shows that Stevens was the writer on are much more science fiction-y, a lot of times they're in labs and things like that. And the ones Stefano was the writer on have more of a gothic haunted house kind of feel. So with that in mind, they started the show up. Stevens was around for most of the first season. And then Stefano kind of came in and took over mid-season or so. The second season really, most of that was the work of Ben Brady, who came in later on. So you don't see as much influence from either of those guys, Stevens or Stefano, later on. They also had a really amazing crew on the show, some of whom would later go on to be involved in Star Trek, including Robert Justman, who was like a first assistant director. Also, Fred Phillips, who was a makeup man on the show. And the Projects Unlimited team, who did some of the special effects, included Jim Danforth and Chang. And Chang created a number of things for Star Trek. So one of the main concepts that they had for the show was the idea of what they called the bear, which is like the alien or monster that usually appeared. This is one of the things that really set it apart from Twilight Zone, because they almost always had a monster in the show. And they said that they wanted to have this to kind of pull in the audience. In the writer's Bible for the show, the bear was described as one splendid, staggering, shuddering effect that induces awe or wonder or terror. So that's people always
my description for myself.
People always say, "Why? Oh, they always had these crazy monsters," but it makes the show memorable. And they definitely had them in almost all of the first season, but not so much the second season.
Karen, do you think that they did that to kind of differentiate themselves from Twilight Zone in that respect?
I think that was part of it. And I think it was, again, to catch the viewer, to really, get their attention. And yeah, I think setting it apart, it certainly pulled in the kids. And, if you look at most of the episodes, they had a lot of kind of adult content that I think pulled in the older viewers. Yeah. And then lastly, I'll just mention the music. I think we probably would want to talk about that, but that was by a composer named Dominic Frontier. He was sort of as a young man, he was a virtuoso. He grew up in Connecticut. He was able to play multiple instruments as a young man, and then wound up getting the attention of a music director at 20th Century Fox, who sort of sponsored him and brought him into the studio system. And of course, the music on Outer Limits is quite memorable. So with that, I will let us go into our usual freewheeling discussion, but I just wanted to provide a little background for how Outer Limits came to be.
Why, thank you. That's some good recon we have from our reconnaissance officer on the Outer Limits.
Yeah, I think as far as the Outer Limits goes, I pretty much grew up on it. I think growing up, I was more into Outer Limits than I was Twilight Zone. It was like later in my life that I got into Twilight Zone. I think it's because of the bear. It's because of the alien or the monster or the creature or whatever that would appear each week. Now, again, that's something they strayed away from in the second season. And I don't know if that was the reason for it to get canceled halfway through, but the first season, though, has some great monsters and creatures. Like you mentioned, Chang and Jim Danforth and people like that, putting those things together. In fact, the first episode was Galaxy Being, right?
Right.
And that one, the Galaxy Being was this like glowing white creature, alien. And I was like looking through one of the books and they had pictures. It was just a guy in like a black wetsuit. And they were like highlights, as the light hit it, there'd be little highlights. And they just took that and reversed it into a negative. So suddenly the black suit with the highlights is now a white glowing figure with these black spots. Very simple effect. And of course, this is all pre-CG and let's face it was cheap TV effects, but they used them to great effect, basically.
Oh, yeah. They had some really clever effects and clever designs, really out there kind of designs. And Janos Prohaska was part of that group too, who created and portrayed a number of aliens, including the Thetan from Architects of Fear. And he also, would later go on to do the Horta for Star Trek and other characters. So it was a very, very creative group.
Well, before we go down the rabbit hole of episodes, what were a couple of your guys' like favorite alien creature monsters bear?
Ooh, Larry, you have any thoughts?
Well, I'm a Twilight Zone guy, just like
but you just watched all these Outer Limits episodes.
Larry's more of an intellectual.
Well, that being said, one of the things that I enjoyed, I remember the Zantis Misfits and the glass hand, demon with a glass hand, but I went deep into this, doing research, watching episodes, and it was great to pick a favorite.
Well, not so much episodes, right? We'll talk about those, but I mean just a couple favorite.
Yeah. I'm a fan features. Of the Zantis. I mean, they're creepy and they're buggy and these weird faces on them.
I can't even still look at that. I watched it the other night, and every time when they showed them all starting to do the jailbreak out of the ship, and they not the still ones, but the animated ones, and they're popping out and turning their heads and looking, and they got the one that looks sort of like a beatnik, and then the one with the gray hair. I was just like, oh God, I can't look at this. I can't look at it.
I gotta say, even though the effects are dated, they still stand up, in my opinion, today. I mean, the stories really carried these episodes, and I enjoy and granted, I have a bias. I am into this genre, but they still work today. whether it's a cautionary tale or, you have the bear, but sometimes it was humanity that was the bear. Those stories still have resonance today, which was impressive to me.
Well, like I said, they were simple effects, but a lot of them were, look at the Sixth Finger, the makeup they had on David McCullum, in his final form. That's like classic Outer Limits. Even the coelacanth frog creature things that are in Tourist Trap. And they come crawling out of the basically it's the MGM pool, but come crawling out of the lake there and stuff. I mean, that's just amazing stuff.
Yeah, I was reading a little bit about how they had to make those the suits and the guys inside, and they had to put like some ballast, and then one of the guys was like basically drowning inside of the thing, and it was just like that was a lot of work for one episode, and they had to crank those things out in a week. And you've got these big heavy suits these guys are trying to wear, and they had to make multiple for the scenes where there were several of them running out of the lake. That's an impressive amount of work for a TV episode.
Yeah, I mean, that really amazed me, because it's like you have all these creatures coming out of the lake, and it's like, well, that's not, I mean, nowadays CG, you can like shoot one and then just multiply it and stick them in the frame. But back then, if you wanted 5 or 6 creatures coming out of a lake, you had to make 5 or 6 creatures to come out of the lake.
Right. I'll tell you, one of my favorite bears is the Ebonites from Nightmare.
Oh yeah.
I was going to mention makeup.
That.
It's just creepy enough. And again, like to Larry's point, there is a certain cheapness. If you closely examine the episodes and the creatures, there's a cheapness. It's like, okay, so it's a skinny guy in a leotard, but the makeup itself, there's, it's both creepy and beautiful and graceful in a way.
Yeah, I love the makeup, and even like the bat wings on the suit. They basically go from the feet to the hands, and they lift them up.
Yeah.
Yeah. The way that the actors carried the role, I mean, it really. Oh God, what episode was I watching? Keeper of the Purple Twilight. And it was like a chicken head, but like a gorilla body. Is that the right? Do I have a different?
No, that's. I know which one you're talking about. It's where the guy is
Duplicate Man. That's
the Duplicate
what it was.
Man. Yeah.
Yes. And when you first see the creature, it's kind of like, what is this? Like a college mascot, But the way that the guy goes in, and then the dialogue and everything, it really draws you into the story. And I had to think back. We had a conversation a couple of episodes ago with Bob where he's like, oh, yeah, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, just like some of the Batman episodes, when the budgets went down, you just had a black room with like set pieces. A lot of these monsters started off with like a flashlight on a black wall and then evolved into whatever the bear was going to be for that episode.
Well, that's the other amazing thing about the Outer Limits, and Karen touched on it a little bit, is just the fact that it's almost like science fiction noir in a lot of these episodes. And great care was taken, to basically put shadows on the wall. Right. I mean, you look at somebody's in a lab, and suddenly in the back on the wall, there's like shadows of different shapes and different patterns, and they're not like lit perfectly studio bright. Maybe half their face is dark, or they have a shadow on them. Very, very stylized, very cool.
Right. Stevens and Stefano were very aware of European and Japanese filmmaking styles, and they worked with the cinematographers to emulate that. Like you're saying, Bob, they wanted it to be stylistic. They wanted it to evoke mood, and that's something that's you don't see so much anymore. And again, I hate to like always go back to Star Trek, but you look at the lighting in Star Trek, it was very stylized as well. And it's something you don't see so much. And I think a lot of times when younger people look at something like a Star Trek or a Twilight Zone, not a Twilight Zone, Outer Limits, and they're like, well, why is it, why are these shadows and why is this filmed this way? What's the angle? Because they would also, use unusual angles in Outer Limits. And it's to evoke mood and emotion, it's something people aren't used to necessarily anymore.
I'm saying it still works today, when you watch it.
Yeah, well, I mean, Larry mentioned the black infinite backgrounds of the set pieces, but, why not take it a step further and instead of having a black background, have a lighter color background and, put the shadows on it. It makes it look like a fuller set.
Mm-hmm.
Very true. Well, let's ask Bob, what was your favorite bear?
Oh, man, well, definitely, I was going to say the Ebonites, definitely the Zantis. I mentioned the coelacanth frog creature things, whatever you want to call them. And there were a lot of, just simple things, too.
Right.
Was it Wolf 359?
I was gonna say the same
it's
thing.
It's like
Bob.
you've got I don't know what would you call it? It's not really an alien. It doesn't come from space, but interdimensional creature or something. But yeah, it's just like you can kind of see it's like a material stretched over two hands with a face in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
But the way it moves and the actor obviously he was probably a puppeteer or whatever, but just the way it moves and the way it is lit and acts it's an amazing creature.
It's very creepy, and I had a strange reaction watching it because I was getting creeped out, but I was like, well, this is silly. It's just like vinyl or a balloon or something when the guy's hand's behind it. So I could rationalize it, but at the same time, I was like, wow, that is super creepy.
Well, Karen, or is it?
It is.
One of the yeah, right. One of the first episodes I wanted to dive into was Wolf 359 for obvious reasons. If you're a Trekkie, and it was if you have never seen the original Outer Limits series and you want to take a deep dive, Wolf 359 is a good way to start. Now you can go in with the Architects of Fear or the Sixth Finger, the Zanti Misfits. Those are all up there, but I really enjoyed Wolf 359.
That was one that wasn't at the top of my list to watch, but I did go in and watch it, and it was a very interesting episode because of that creature, but then that whole concept of we're going to recreate a planet here on Earth, and
right,
just the idea behind that was kind of interesting, and then this idea that somehow they've created some sort of consciousness or some sort of entity that's been compelled to preside over this planet. I don't know. That was it was very creepy though. That the whole mood that was evoked was what struck me.
Part of the fun in watching these to me was, you think it's going in a certain direction and it doesn't. It gets into a different story. Not all the episodes. I mean, some of them you can kind of see, how it's going to end. But this was one that really surprised me and I enjoyed. At first I was kind of like, what was it? The brain of Colonel Barham. Good acting, but that's kind of like Spock's brain to me as far as the limits go. It was a guy's brain in a container, and they were doing. He was terminal, but they were able to preserve his brain and enhance it, and he could, I don't know, through telekinesis or whatever, control people. So. He was able to use one of the soldiers to beat down this other guy and get some information or whatnot. And his I think it was his girlfriend, not his wife. He wanted her brought to him, but his evil part of himself was, the brain had good and bad. It almost reminded me of Star Wars, the concept of the Sith and the Jedi. And that's another thing, too, that kind of struck me with this. There's a lot of stories, and Karen, you mentioned this with, Star Trek and even going to Star Wars, where it all goes back to like this, like a central concept of good and bad, or rational or irrational. Anyway, as far as the brain of Colonel Barham, it was an okay episode, but if you're watching them, it might be one you can skip.
Well, I mean, like for me, I'm all about the bear.
Yeah.
I always love to see the monster of the week. But there was one that I really got into, and maybe it was the time I watched it, but it was 100 Years of the Dragon.
Oh, yeah, I watched
and
that.
And I just happened to watch that one on Election Day. as I was kind of like looking on my phone to see election results, and then watching 100 Years of the Dragon, which was basically an Asian country. It didn't really, I don't think they ever really said what country it was. It's just an Asian country. And they developed this serum that when they inject you with it, I think it's for 30 minutes, your face and your body and your skin is like completely pliable like clay. And they can sit there and mold you however they want. And they basically have someone that they mold into the image of one of the presidential candidates for the United States. And he ends up winning the White House. And basically he's there to be able to do whatever functions makes it easier for this Asian country to advance their troops basically in this region where they're in a war. I thought it was great. And it was more like, because it was the vice president that first kind of figures out that there's something wrong. There's something going on with this guy. He's not quite right. And so he's the one that goes out and solves the mystery. And then it's almost like a whodunit. They're at a party and he's like, he comes in with a suitcase and the serum and everything else to demonstrate what had happened. But I thought it was and again, it was a very shadowy noir type episode, but I thought it was one of the better ones, even though it didn't have a monster.
Yeah, I was surprised. At first I was like, should I skip this one? And then I thought, well, you know what? I'll watch it. And I was pleasantly surprised. And I think it's part of just the overall quality of the show. It was so high. We had such good actors, not only in that episode, but in most of the episodes. They had really good actors. And I think it had something to do with the times as well. Just the idea that this not even compromised individual, this fake individual had been put in a position of power. There was something really obviously very alarming about that. So, yeah, that was a very good episode.
It was. Without naming communism, I think the bear was communism. I mean, it was a Asian country, but there was a lot, in that era, what we have, like McCarthyism, communism, the world was changing from the world prior to that. And I think it's one of those episodes that stands up today. I can understand Bob getting a little anxious watching that while he's watching the election results.
I always enjoy anything that Robert Culp is in. For some reason, Robert Culp tends to eat up the scenery in every scene he's in. And of course, he was in Demon with a Glass Hand, which I'm sure we'll get to. But he was also in Architects of Fear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where they're actually, they're trying to avert a world war by creating an alien, basically turning Robert Culp into an alien who would appear during a United Nations briefing. And basically, it's almost like what government does these days. It's like, hey, look over there. Here's a distraction for you to take you away from this other stuff that's going on.
I think the thing about that one, and that is one of my favorite episodes. Obviously, it has one of the best bears ever, the Thetan. And I remember years ago, somebody was going to produce a really high quality figure from that, and they never did. But there's a really good personal story there. They take the time to make you care about the characters. You know, Robert Culp and his wife in that. You know, they're a very sweet couple, and the fact that he's basically sacrificing himself, and then as the end kind of points out, you know, like for what? For, you know, what good does it do for him to do this thing when, you know, the idea of like they're going to do this thing, generate hate and fear, where maybe love is a better way to go. So yeah, it's a real striking episode. It's not just for the bear, although the bear is fantastic. And you know, they cut the bear out when it was originally shown in some places. When the Thetan shows up and starts stomping around, they actually kind of cut that out in some places because they thought it was too horrifying to show.
Yeah, I heard they put like a black screen over it or something, and some areas didn't even show the episode; they just skipped it.
It was too much.
Yeah. Well, I agree with Bob on Robert Culp. A very, very strong episode. And let's get into the Demon with the Glass Hand.
That was Harlan Ellison.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say Mr. Harlan Ellison, and a great story. And you know, the hand, I mean, it's just kind of eerie, you know, to think about it.
Well, when they first reveal the hand, it's basically doing the hang loose thing because it's missing the three fingers in the middle.
It's all aglow like a Christmas tree. But
yeah, no, it was an very interesting concept. I mean, it was very well thought through, obviously by Harlan Ellison. But Robert Culp plays Trent, who came back from the future. He was sent back because when the aliens destroy the human race, he's like the only survivor. So he holds the key. So he's sent back, but missing 3 of the fingers on his computer hand. And the aliens can come back from the future through this mirror, but they can only come back 2 at a time. Mm-hmm. And basically, he'll kill one, and then it's instantly replaced by another. So I was kind of thinking, well, why don't you just grab the 2 of them and tie them up in a chair and be done with it? You know? But
do you guys know, was Harlan happy with that episode? I know
he was happy with the episode, but I read that he brought a lawsuit against James Cameron years later because he felt that there was more than just a little influence that Cameron stole from Demon with a Glass Hand and put into the Terminator.
Yeah, he thought both Demon with a Glass Hand and another Outer Limits episode, Soldier, had influenced Terminator. And especially, we can talk about Soldier soon, but watching the opening of Soldier made me think of Terminator for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah.
And supposedly, I guess Cameron agreed. He didn't, Harlan didn't win the lawsuit, but Cameron did admit that it was an influence, and I think put Harlan Ellison in the credits at the end of the movie, but I think that's about as far as it went.
I think he gave him a fat stack too, because I think there was a settlement.
Well, like I said, there's a lot of things that influence, different stories, different movies, different books.
Well, we're all influenced by everything we've seen and heard and experienced.
Right. Just try to change it enough so that it's not a ripoff.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think Demon with a Glass Hand, it's one of the most stylistic episodes, too, because they're using that Bradbury building in L.A. with those elevators on the inside with the looks like wrought iron cages and stuff. It's just, again, that noir feeling. Yeah, it's visually, I mean, I can see it in my head so easily. It makes such an impression. And it's funny because, again, it's a case where, like, the aliens are really unimpressive in the episode. They basically guys running around in leotards with, dark eyes or with looks like pantyhose over their faces.
Turbans. One guy had a turban, didn't he?
Yeah, I think so. But they sell it because the actors are so serious about everything. They make you buy into it all. And the whole story with Trent and the girl, and then his discovery at the end about who he really is. It's just all put together really well. It's a really tight little hour of drama. So
now that's a Star Trek tie-in too, because the actress who plays the girl is Arlene Martell,
right?
Who played T'Pring in Star Trek.
For some reason, that didn't occur to me.
And we also discussed her in the Twilight Zone too, because she was the nurse in that one episode. But what I enjoyed was he would retrieve these fingers one at a time, and he'd stick it on the hand, and he'd be like, "All right, can you tell me what's going on now?" Yeah. Well, no, I don't have enough information. I'm not complete. I don't have enough information. Get another finger, stick it out. Okay, now can you tell me? It was a sort of a running thing through the episode.
But boss, where are we going to find that finger? Kid, you don't want to look. Sorry.
But
I had to go there.
It was definitely a cool episode. If we go back to the other Harlan Ellison episode, The Soldier, with another Star Trek actor, Michael Ansara, who played Chang in Day of the Dove, Klingon. It's an excellent episode. I still kind of question when the linguist is like, "Well, I'm going to take him home to my family now."
Yes,
it's like,
that makes no sense.
Here's this soldier who's bred to be nothing but a soldier. He doesn't understand anything other than being a soldier. And you're going to bring him in your living room and have him live in your house with your family, your wife and your 2 kids.
Yeah, that makes no sense to me. That's the part of the whole thing where it's like, okay, you have to buy into the thought that the therapist is kind of a little bit nuts because this guy is a killer. Why are you doing this? Makes no sense at all.
I mean, the only explanation is the military wants to keep bringing in all these people to interrogate him, and maybe the therapist thought, well, the only way I can do this is to get him out of here. And
maybe
where else can I take him other than home?
I'll just endanger my entire family.
For the greater good.
Yeah, he might go crazy and kill my children and wife right in front of me, but it's a risk I'm willing to take.
Well, the other thing too is he brings him in, and you see that he's in the home, and he's really skittish, and he's ready to just kill anyone at a second notice. And he tells his son, "Oh, take him and show him his room." It's like the son is the sacrifice. So let's see what happens here.
Harry wasn't a soldier, but it was kind of the same concept in Harry and the Hendersons.
Bringing it back to Bigfoot.
But yeah, that's another, it's a Harlan Ellison episode with a really intriguing concept. Somehow, there's a lightning strike, and the soldier is fighting his enemy in the future. Somehow they get transported. The second soldier, the other soldier, gets sort of stuck in between time zones for most of the episode. He's kind of in a limbo. And but soldier what's his name? Now I forgot. It's like Quarlo Claudreny.
Yeah.
He gets zapped to our time and doesn't have a clue what's going on, and he speaks sort of this gibberish English. Still smokes, though. Apparently smoking is still a big thing.
Smoking was universal back then.
It's
everything from the Flintstones to the Outer Limits.
Yeah. But Michael Ansara does a really nice job. He brings an intensity to it, obviously, that's needed.
Oh yeah, because you can just feel that he's going to snap at any second.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why. Yeah, you can't take your eyes off him, because you do have this feeling like he could break somebody's neck any second here.
Right.
And there's never a moment where, at least when I was watching, I never felt like, oh, he now trusts this guy. I never felt like he fully trusted him. You know, I still felt like he could turn on him at any point.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was an interesting one. I don't know that it had the greatest resolution at the end, but still an entertaining episode.
Well, you know, I will say, obviously, you know, the music is great. Before I get into the music, the other thing I liked, and these are 2 episodes that I did not get a chance to watch, but the title of the episode is so intriguing. I'm going to watch these in the coming week. The Man Who Was Never Born.
Oh, that's a good one.
That was definitely good. Martin Landau.
Landau, and I didn't have time to watch that. The other one is Production and Decay of Strange Particles.
Didn't
see that one.
It's such an intriguing title. I mean, what is the episode going to be about? I don't know, but I want to find out.
Well, no, they had some definitely interesting titles. I thought one episode, again, without a bear, that was cool was Controlled Experiment. Do you guys watch that one?
Oh, the comedy
with
episode?
Grace Lee Whitney.
That one.
Going back and forth.
I guess it was a pilot for a TV show. They were going to do a sci-fi comedy, and it didn't go anywhere, but it became the only sort of comedic episode of Outer Limits, in which this guy comes through an elevator. These 2 aliens were watching this guy come through an elevator, and his girlfriend's standing there, and she's like, "You two-timing rat," and shoots him. And they have this device that they're able to play that back and forth and rewind and fast forward in slow motion and everything else. And they're trying to figure out the whole motivation for this whole thing. And so they just keep, you know, playing it again and again and again and again. But it was kind of an interesting concept. And Barry Morse played one of the aliens. Barry Morse
Carol
being
O'Connor.
from Space 1999. The Doctor from Space 1999.
That was a cost-saving episode, too, because they could reuse the same footage over and over again.
Yeah, but you had to pay the editor a lot of money.
Well, I don't know that they did, but yeah, I know that towards that point in the season, they were looking for a way to save some money. So,
yeah, that editor, he was into time and a half and double time and everything else, meal penalties and...
What about, did you guys watch the 2-part episode, The Inheritors?
You know, I watched part 1 and I just ran out of time. I couldn't watch part 2.
Ah.
I was going to. It was on my list of episodes to get in because you guys were talking it up real good, and I didn't make it.
I will. In that case, I won't get into too many details, but I will say I think it's excellently acted episode. Robert Duvall is in it. Now, Robert Duvall was in a couple of episodes, both really good, The Inheritors and then The Chameleon, which is another really good episode. And then Steve Einat, who was in, you'll remember him from Star Trek as Garth the Visor.
Oh, yes.
Lord Garth.
Lord Garth. Lord Garth. I think Ivan Dixon was also in this episode. So
Kinslow.
There's, our Hogan's Hero connection. I know we were talking the other day about how many different people from, Hogan's Heroes,
General
Batman,
Burkhalter was in an episode.
So many shows, you'll see in these different episodes. But yeah, The Inheritors is really nice. It's a completely bearless 2-parter, but very well written and well acted about 4 soldiers who receive head injuries. They actually all get, I think, shot by bullets in the head and develop some interesting capabilities, and then start doing when they're released back into civilian life, they all start doing some mysterious things. And anyway, the government is kind of trying to go after them. But yeah, Robert Duvall does really well in that. It's just so funny to see him on TV for one thing, because I think the first place I probably ever saw him was in The Godfather. And to see him, and he's he's a young guy, and he's just such a talented actor.
He is.
Did you happen to see the episode with him called The Chameleon?
No.
I don't believe so. I think the first time I saw Robert Duvall was in that Twilight Zone with the dollhouse. Yeah.
Well, The Chameleon's another good one.
What's it about, bud?
There was one episode I thought was like really creepy, and it was another Robert Culp episode called Corpus Earthling. Did you guys see that one?
Yeah.
Oh, watch that one. That basically, Robert Culp is a doctor, like a surgeon. His wife works with a geologist who's a professor who's studying rocks. And they have these two alien these two rocks that fell from the sky. And at one point, they leave Robert Culp alone in the lab as they go out to get something. And Robert Culp, supposedly from a previous injury, had a plate in his head, metal plate. And that allowed him to hear these two rocks talking to each other.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And so the rocks basically figure out that he's listening in on them. So, of course, he's got to die. And he's the only one that can hear these rocks. So when they come back, the rocks have this sort of, they can, take over your mind and make you do things. And they make him like crawl up to a window and go to jump out, and they grab him, and he keeps talking about these rocks that are talking and everything, and they think he's going crazy. So at one point his wife says, well, we need to get away, we need to go somewhere. And so off she goes with him, and they go off on this vacation, and the rocks follow, and they can take over bodies. They end up like taking over his wife's body and the professor's body, and of course they're trying to kill him. And there's this really great sequence where he goes out to the store, he comes back, and his wife's in bed. So he like crawls on the bed, and she's like, "Oh, I was waiting for you," and she turns around, and the makeup is so minimal for Outer Limits, but it's really effective. It's like, the really shaded cheekbones and eye sockets, and this really creepy looking makeup. So when she turns around, she's got the makeup, and he just like screams and runs out of the room. It's a really good episode, I thought. Again, not with a bear. I guess the bear was a couple rocks.
Bear rocks.
Bear rocks.
And, what were you saying about The Chameleon?
But it's very good.
Oh, I was just going to say you should check out The Chameleon. I think it's probably the last episode of the first season. And the premise, you have to kind of take it all with a grain of salt. So this UFO lands, and like in the woods, basically these aliens have like some sort of problem, and then the army detects the UFO, and they see some of the aliens get out of their ship, and they assume that they're there for no good. They try to figure out some way, to get to the aliens. And the plan they come up with eventually is like, well, we'll infiltrate the ship with someone that we've turned into an alien. So that part of it is a little weak. But the story with Duvall is like a secret agent, and he just basically has nothing to live for except his work. At one point he tells somebody, I have no one I love and no one loves me, and I just do my work, basically. So they have this process where they can turn him in. They have some DNA from one of the aliens from like touching a tree or something. So they use this weird process that they call, like, it's somehow using the DNA and sound waves. Anyway, they turned him into, they turned him into one of the aliens, and they broadcast these messages to make it sound like another alien craft had, crashed, and he's the survivor of that craft. So he gets to their ship, and the aliens there, like, they don't buy it for a second. They're like, yeah, we know you're a human being. But essentially what happens is he finds belonging with those aliens, and he decides that he's going to stay with them, and they don't have any ill intentions towards human beings. They had faked like having nuclear material on their craft because they knew that they wouldn't get attacked if it looked like they had nuclear weapons. And then he winds up, going off with them because he finally feels like he has something meaningful in his life.
That sounds like, what's that, James Cameron with the blue aliens and they got the thing.
Avatar?
Avatar. They accept him into the tribe.
Yeah, it's probably, what do they say? There's only 20 actual plot lines or stories out there.
And Avatar used them all.
Yeah, well, there's going to be more Avatar movies. Oh, yeah, because everybody wanted them. But it's a good episode as far as the actual acting and production. The aliens are pretty cool looking.
I hear tell that the next Avatar will involve talking rocks, Bob. So, hey,
excellent.
Cameron going back to...
I don't remember watching that Outer Limits episode.
And Zoe Saldana is going to have a plate in her head.
I was looking over this the book from the fine folks at Creature Features, and there was a picture and an episode that I didn't get to watch, but the picture was intriguing of the bear. The episode is called The Mutant.
Oh.
and the big buggy-eyed... Did either of you guys see that episode?
No, did not watch that this time around.
I didn't watch it this time around, but the guy has got like fried eggs for eyeballs. Yeah.
Basically like a cartoon. Yeah, I'm going to check that out as well. I got about 5 or 6 episodes.
When I was a kid, a lot of the times when I would see Outer Limits was when I was over at my grandparents' place on Sundays. We would go visit them on Sundays, and I would usually have to sit through religious shows first in the morning, and then Outer Limits would come on around like 1 o'clock or so, and I would be like, I want to watch Outer Limits. So I'd get to watch Outer Limits, and then later we'd have to sit through like Lawrence Welk. So Outer Limits was like the one bright spot on a Sunday.
Let little Karen watch her heathen TV program.
She had her religion and they had theirs.
And so, it was if it was a day where like The Mutant was on, I would be like, oh man, but I'd watch it, because it was all I had. But there were certain episodes that were less welcome or thrilling than others.
Well, I remember for me, it was like, I remember being over at a friend's house, and it was like, I was spending the night, and we ended up watching that was the first time I saw Outer Limits, and it was The Sixth Finger. And I was, being the kind of guy who liked aliens and monsters and creatures and things, I was really depressed when they turned him back at the end of the episode. But I did realize that he had to come back later in the week to be on Man from U.N.C.L.E. So, of course, they had to turn him back into David McCullum before the end of the episode.
That's cool. I will say Karen's grandparents are pretty cool. I love Nana and Pawpaw, don't get me wrong, but we used to have to watch Lawrence Welk and Little House on the Prairie. And
yeah, that's what happens when you're growing up with like normal people. there's no way around.
For my dad, it was Wide World of Sports. The thrill of victory and the agony of defeat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My saving grace was my mother enjoyed Star Trek, Twilight Zone, Outer Limits. So, we go back home and get to watch all that stuff. To this day, I love her to death. She calls me and she's like, Larry, I'm like, yeah, have you ever seen this movie called Eyes Without a Face? It's French. And I'm like, oh my God. I have. So, she, to this day. And then Avatar is one of her favorite movies, so...
Wow.
I hope she's not listening in.
Yeah.
Larry?
But, God, it makes me wonder, did they, and it's so sad that they got cut after like a season and a half.
Well,
if these guys knew the reverb that it would have throughout television history.
Yeah.
But then again, in the second season, was it really going in the right direction? I mean, would it have been, amazing episodes after that, or would it have been like the third season of Star Trek?
Yeah, I think there were a couple of reasons they got canned in the second season. I mean, part of it was, I think, kind of the quality had changed, obviously. I mean, they still had some good episodes in the second season, but they had less influence from both Stevens and Stefano. They also got switched from their Monday time slot to Saturday.
And they were up against Jackie Gleason.
Yes. So, you know, it's the same old story, just like with Star Trek and other shows. You know, you get put in a death slot, basically. That doesn't help. So, but yeah, none of these guys, you know, it's amazing. They made these shows and it was a job. And I'm sure at the time they took pride in their work and did the best they could. But nobody thought back then, you know, there was no, they were still pioneering TV and there was no people sitting there looking at stuff, you know, 20, 30 years before. So they just did it. They didn't know crazy people like us were going to be talking about it 60 years later.
Well, I mean, that was even kind of before the days of syndication. So, you know, there are some TV shows that are just lost to the ages because they didn't bother keeping them. It's like, hey, you know, it was on, it's done. You know, maybe it had one rerun during the summer and then on to something else.
When my mom would, you know, she watched it when it first came on, and out in, you know, North Dakota, they had all of like 2 TV stations, maybe 3. And so when one of the things we didn't talk about was the beginning and the ending of each episode, the voice taking control of the TV.
I was just thinking about
Perrin.
that. They'd be freaked out because, you know, they only got like 2 or 3 stations and this guy's taking control of their TV set. I mean, it was believable.
Well, I mean, I thought that was like one of the greatest beginnings and endings to any TV show. And unfortunately, in the second season, they condensed it and did like a really short version of it. But the first season, I mean, that is classic.
Oh, yeah. It's like another thing, you know, it's a signature move. It sets it apart. And Vic Perrin, of course, has that fantastic voice. And it's another Star Trek connection because he was the voice of the Metrons in Arena. And he appeared in Mirror Mirror as the leader of the Halkans. So, yeah, you know, it's... You hear that and you know what you're getting into. And then, of course, he gives you the little moral of the story at the end. So,
well, do you know who did the control voice for the new Outer Limits TV show?
Never watched it.
Never watched it.
Kevin Conroy.
Oh.
Batman.
Yeah.
Love Kevin Conroy.
That's cool.
So there you go. That's one reason, I guess, to watch the new versions. But or just watch the beginning and then you can shut it off.
Yeah.
That sounds good. I heard mixed things about the new Outer Limits.
I heard there was a lot of TNA because it was on cable, and so they wanted to bring viewers of a certain age in. So
Outer Limits After Dark.
The bear was a very different thing. On
a different kind
that was
of
the B-A-R-E instead of the B-E-A-R.
You know, one of the other things I really enjoyed was the music on each episode. A lot of good placement of theremin, you know, instrumentation with the woo, setting the mood and the tone. And
this was like real moody and real, you know, dark.
Oh, man.
Yeah. It set it apart again from everybody else. And I probably should have looked to see what else. I've seen Dominic Frontier's credits on other things, but right now at the moment it escapes me. I could Google it, but yeah, he did other work. I mean, he did work on other shows and films, but you know, definitely most people probably know him for Outer Limits. And I know that...
Well, let's see. I've got Internet Movie Database up right now.
Right now.
Let's take a look here. Dominic Frontieri. The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs.
Oh.
Wow, a lot of these, like, they've got, like, The Incredibles 2 and The Watchmen, and that's all because they showed, like, Outer Limits clips during the movies.
Yeah.
But let's see. He wrote the branded theme song for The Big Lebowski. Who Needs Wings to Fly from Contact? Let's see. Wow. He wrote one episode of Married with Children.
Huh.
Let's see. He did some music for Freebie and the Bean. I'm trying to look at stuff that we would actually know. He wrote music for 3 episodes of The Flying Nun.
Freebie and the Bean, wasn't that Alan Arkin and God, I'm gonna have to find that.
He did music for the TV series Hollywood A Go-Go. He did music for the Alfred Hitchcock Hour, 1 episode.
So maybe we'll just say Outer Limits is his crowning glory.
I'd say, yeah. I'm even looking pre-Outer Limits, and there's a lot of stuff, but like nothing really stands out.
Well, on the CD soundtrack, it's Dominic Fortieri. What is the last name? Fortieri and his orchestra. So the guy had some gravitas back in the day.
Like Esquivel.
There, exactly.
Or Lawrence Welk.
And a 1 and a 2.
Start up the bubble machine. So, I don't know, is there any other, Outer Limits stuff we need to touch on or delve into?
Anything else we want to...
Well, I know people are going to say, you didn't talk about this episode, and you didn't talk about that episode.
Well, we did more of a kind of an overview, but... Zanti, I can sit here and talk all day about Zanti Misfits, but... In fact, I read somewhere that the Zanti Misfits was rated in TV Guide as one of the 100 greatest episodes of all time. Not Outer Limits, but of any TV series.
What is this?
It was like
TV
98
guide
or something.
you speak of, Bob?
What's that?
What is this TV guide you speak of?
It was a Bible at one time, I tell you.
You know, if I was going to pick like the best Outer Limits episode, though, I don't think I would pick Zanti Misfits. I mean,
don't know if I'd call it the best, just my favorite.
Okay, well, you were talking about TV Guide.
100 best.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
I mean, I think if I were going to go with like the best, I don't know which one I would go with. Nightmare would be up there pretty high because it's certainly really well written and well acted.
Well, let's talk about Nightmare for a second because we didn't really talk about it other than the alien.
Yeah, but I mean, it's an excellent episode. The whole idea of the POWs. And then the kind of twist at the end. And it goes back to, I think, Larry, you mentioned the idea of who's the monster, the alien or the human being, right? And that gets to that concept. The human beings were definitely the monster in this case.
Yeah, because they were using the aliens to conduct this experiment to see who could withstand torture or withstand interrogation. Mm-hmm. In fact, one of the ones that were conducting the experiment was Whit Bissell. From Creature from the Black Lagoon and I Was a Teenage Werewolf and so many others.
Yeah, and a very young Martin Sheen is one of the POWs.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's right.
And you know, and another thing that they did in this and they did in a number of other episodes is they had a multiracial cast. Mm-hmm. You know, and they had this issue of the paranoia and distrust between the POWs. I mean, they were projecting a united Earth, which is shades of Star Trek. But you know, once these guys all got settled in to this POW camp and people would be pulled away and interrogated, then everything started breaking down. And that's in some ways very reminiscent of Twilight Zone episodes as well. But just the distrust, mankind's distrust, and we're pretty much always shown to be our own worst enemies.
Well, and speaking of the multiracial cast, you had a black actor, you had an Asian actor, and they weren't just soldiers or whatever. They had like important roles on their ships. Mm-hmm. I think one was a captain and one was but they weren't just kind of thrown in characters. They were integral parts.
Right, and they got, and especially in Nightmare, those actors had significant roles. The one, and I should have written this down, but I didn't know how deep we were going to go into Nightmare. It might have been James Shigeta as the Asian officer.
Yeah.
He was the one they were trying to scapegoat. And he had a very significant role in that episode. And I was thinking, wow, this is like, I don't know, 1964. So it's impressive because I guess my thought from reading and just watching TV from that era, so I didn't feel like you saw a lot of basically non-white people in major roles on TV.
Well, his acting in that episode, too, was excellent.
Oh, yeah. He may be the best actor in that episode.
And he came back in another episode, which I saw, and this like escapes me right now, but yeah, he was a captain in a war, and they were but yeah, it was just,
oh, I think it was The Inheritors. That's
right.
What you were
Yeah,
saying. We were talking offline about some of the same actors.
Episode,
definitely.
First episode of The Inheritors, and yeah, he was in that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one thing I noticed watching Outer Limits this time at this point in my life or whatever, is that there were a lot more roles for non-white actors, and also some of the roles for the women were written really well as compared to a lot of the other shows you would see in that time period. So it was very impressive.
So yeah, I'm definitely not going to put the box set away anytime soon. I'll get to the other episodes. Because it's funny because when I binge on something for an episode, then sometimes once we do the episode, I'm like, okay, I want nothing to do with this for a while. But no, that's why I think I'm going to keep it out and just watch the rest of it. Watch the ones I haven't watched straight through. Now, I don't have the Blu-ray set. I've got the DVD set.
Me too.
But I'm thinking, when you look at the DVDs and you look at even Nightmare, and you can see like the seams in the makeup and things. I don't know if I'd want it on Blu-ray. It's like all that would be even more apparent.
That was my thought with the Twilight Zone as well. I'm just going to keep it on DVD and just work with that.
Some things, they were made to be watched on a 19-inch TV with rabbit ears and not in 4K or 1080p or whatever, because they knew what they could get away with back then.
Yeah, at a certain point, it's sort of diminishing returns. You don't gain anything from upgrading.
Like we were saying, it was before syndication, so there was no thought that this would be seen more than once, maybe twice. So.
Well, they really didn't have enough episodes for standard syndication, but they syndicated it anyway, I guess, because it was popular.
Well, I mean, like TV shows back then, if that's why they were allowed to use a lot of stock footage and things, or reuse creatures or whatever, because they figure, okay, it's stock footage from last season. No one's going to remember that. Mm-hmm. But then when you're binging it and you're watching it over and over, and it's like, oh yeah, they use this scene for that and that scene for this, and yeah,
exactly. Well, look, guys, this was a good one. I'm glad, Karen, you brought it up. I was able to get back into episodes and appreciate it in a whole different light. This is standing side by side with Twilight Zone now in my book.
There we go.
Yeah,
now I think feel my job is complete.
We've been wanting to do Outer Limits for a while now, so glad we finally got to it.
That's true. And I do want to have an honorable mention before we get into the censor sweep that Mr. Stevens, Leslie Stevens, after the cancellation, and we've probably all seen this film. Well, I know we have, Incubus, the infamous Esperanto movie that was, the entire movie was spoken in Esperanto, starred Bill Shatner. A lot of the team from Outer Limits, like I said, the program had just gotten canceled, so he took as many of those folks with him as he could. And it's a good movie, even with the Esperanto. The bear is the devil. How could you get a bigger bear than that?
Just on a little side note, I went to Forrest J. Ackerman. This wasn't really the Acker Mansion. It was more the Acker Bungalow after he lost the Acker Mansion. But, when we went over there to visit, there was Forey sitting in a chair. And he was not really talking to anyone. He was, in his later years. But as soon as this one woman came in who was rather voluptuous, he was talking her up like crazy. And one of the things he was talking her up about was Esperanto. Do you know this is going to be the universal language one day? And blah, 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 blah. Have you ever heard of Esperanto? So that was more my first exposure to that.
Interesting pickup line.
Yeah.
Try that in a bar someday. So, have you ever spoken Esperanto?
Do you know I speak Esperanto?
Monster pa son tatas. Anyway, I digress. Okay, so it is that time in the podcast where we're going to have our censor sweep, and we're going to kick it up to the satellite. Karen has this episode's censor sweep. What do you got for us, Karen?
Well, thank you, Larry. For the censor sweep this week, I have this beautiful book. I know Larry has this as well, from Creature Features. Yes, it's The Outer Limits at 50 by David J. Shao with Ted C. Ripel. So this fantastic book, which is sort of coffee table size, but paperback. We got this guy, I think it was in 2015 at the late lamented Creature Features store in Burbank. It coincided with Monster Palooza that year. And it's a beautiful book. It's got a picture of David McCallum from the Sixth Finger episode on the cover. It does cover all the episodes of the show, but I think the true value of the book is in the pictures. So it's got fantastic photographs from the show. Some of them are behind the scenes, some of them are from the episodes, and then it's got a nice section in the back that goes over a lot of the products, the merchandise that was made for the show. So I have no idea really how you can get this book now. I know that Larry had pointed out to me he was looking on, I think, eBay, and there were some completely ridiculous prices for the book. I mean, if you want to sell your car and buy the book, that's cool, but I think I would just look in some used bookstores, things like that, go to some conventions if we ever have conventions again. Yeah. I'll put it up on the post and you can see it. Really nice book. Really happy I got a hold of it.
See, now I have an Outer Limits book. It's the Outer Limits Compendium, I believe. And it was by David Shao. And it came out in like 1990. This was like the second volume or second version. It was like 1998. So I don't know how that compares or contrasts or differs from, because this was like GNP Crescendo, I think, that published this one. Yeah,
I've got Shao's official companion. Let me see what year this guy is. This is 1986.
Okay, so maybe mine was the second version of that one.
So what I noticed with the official companion is it goes very deep into every episode. So it's like the deep cut version. And he gives you a lot of background about how the episodes were made. Whereas the Outer Limits at 50 is much more of a picture book. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think that's the distinction. So if you wanted to know everything about Outer Limits, I'd get the companion. If you wanted some nice photographs, I'd get the Outer Limits at 50 if you can find it anywhere.
Very cool.
Well, thank you, Karen. And before we close out this episode, we found out late last night, early this morning, the passing of David Prowse, the actor who portrayed the Dark Lord of the Sith, Darth Vader, in Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. David was in Hammer films. He was in some Benny Hill episodes. He did the convention circuit for years. He was at different conventions. And we'll have a quick go round with some memories and thoughts. Let's start it off with Bob.
Well, yeah, I mean, I grew up with David Prowse basically in the Hammer films, like Horror Frankenstein and Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell. And, yeah, I mean, and of course in Star Wars. In fact, I was very disappointed in Jedi where they finally took his helmet off and it wasn't Prowse underneath.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought, here this guy has given his heart and soul to the role for 3 movies. And he doesn't get the reveal. Yeah, they have some guy who looks like Uncle Fester in there. But
yeah.
But no, I mean, David Prowse, amazing, just like statuesque. I mean, he was huge and muscular, and I don't think anyone else at the time could have pulled off the Vader role.
True. He, I'd read an article where he helped train Christopher Reeves for bulking up for Superman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then, of course, he was also in The Clockwork Orange.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Karen, any words or comments? Any Mr. David Prowse?
Well, I remember going to, I think it was a Grand Slam convention in Pasadena. Mm-hmm. So it was more Star Trek focused than Star Wars. But David Prowse was there signing autographs. And you were there too, Larry.
Yes, I remember.
And I remember thinking, well, I should get his autograph because this is Darth Vader.
Right.
So I was never a huge autograph hound, but there were certain people that I definitely wanted to get autographs from. And going up to his table, and it was one of those days, for whatever reason, people were in the hall and they weren't in the dealer's room, so nobody was there. And just going up to the table, and he was the nicest gentleman. He was so kind, and we just started talking, and he signed a picture. We kept talking, and then he said, well, come around the corner here. Let's take a picture. You know, back in the days when people would take pictures with you and not charge you for a selfie or anything like that. And I had an actual camera at that time. And I think you took the picture for us. Mm-hmm. And he put his arm around me. We took a picture. And I just thought, wow, he was a very genuine person. And I know he had, he could rail against Lucas and other, things. I read all the interviews and stuff. But I would say for a fan experience, it was a very pleasant experience. And certainly, his portrayal of Vader was a part of my childhood that, always appreciate. So just, wish all the best to his family.
Yes. I'd seen him at a couple of shows. Like Karen had said, the Sci-Fi Summit down in Pasadena, there was a comic book outlet here. It had 2 or 3 shops, and their distinction was that they were in a mall. And other than the movie Mallrats, Kevin Smith's film, I'd never seen a comic shop in a mall. But my niece Kayla was, maybe 5 or 6, and she grew up on Star Wars for obvious reasons. And I took her with to get the autograph from David Prowse. And this is after episode 1 had come out. And so the autograph says, David Prowse is Darth Vader, definitively. And I have it on this great 1970s poster of Vader, and has like a little purple cloud background. And he's kind of walking out towards you with the, you could tell they painted the laser part of the lightsaber, but it is one of my cherished pieces of memorabilia that I need to find room in the office here to put up. So rest in peace, David Prowse, and thank you for all of the entertainment that you provided us fans over the years.
On that note, this will conclude this transmission from Planet 8. We would like to thank all of our intergalactic audience for listening. Be sure to head on over to our website at www.planet8podcast.com, where you can get more information on this episode's topic.
For more conversation, find us on Twitter at Planet 8Cast,
or on Facebook at facebook.com/Planet8Podcast.
We want to thank you guys for tuning in each and every episode. We look forward to your input and opinions. Until next time, this is Planet 8 signing off. End transmission.
By George, he's got it. It is the end.
We now return control of your television set to you. Until next week at this same time, when the control voice will take you to the outer limits.